The Gulfstream G650 jet, bearing the presidential seal of the Republic of Zambesi, sliced through the indigo sky, descending toward Maobu International Airport. Inside, President Gabriel Nyambe sat alone in the cabin's luxury hush, his eyes fixed on the glittering lights of the capital below. His city, his country, and yet not truly his. The Davos trip had gone exactly as planned. His speech at the World Economic Forum had earned standing ovations from Western CEOs and heads of state. Zambesi, Africa's new investment frontier. The presentation had been drafted by foreign consultants. Its vision wasn't his. Its policies, he hadn't chosen them. 20 minutes to landing, Mr. President, announced his chief of staff, entering with a tablet in hand. Here's a summary of the commitments made. Nyambe nodded, scanning the screen. New mining concessions for European firms, privatization of the national water utility, tax breaks for foreign investors, cuts to public spending, all cloaked in the language of prosperity, but each a quiet siphoning of Zambesi's wealth outward. The French foreign minister was particularly pleased, the aide added. He said President Macron wants to arrange a state visit, expand their military presence in the northern provinces. More troops on our soil, Nyambe said quietly, to protect us from threats they define. Of course, sir. Thank you for the report. As the jet touched down, Nyambe braced for the ceremonial farce, the honor guard, the press statement, the performance of strength and sovereignty. In truth, not one major decision in his 6-year presidency had been made without Western approval. The motorcade snaked through Mubu's wide colonial boulevards, past gleaming foreign corporate towers and dense, impoverished settlements. The contrast had once haunted Nyambe. Now he had learned to focus on development indicators, GDP growth, FDI statistics, credit ratings. At the presidential palace, Henri Devaux, his French security advisor, awaited him with the evening briefing. "Welcome back, Mr. President," Devaux said smoothly. "A few matters require your attention. First, the IMF has submitted its quarterly review. They request your signature by morning." Nyambe took the thick document without opening it. He already knew the contents. Deeper austerity, more concessions, further erosion of sovereignty, traded for lifelines of foreign credit. There's also been increased activity among opposition groups in the East. Devaux continued. "We recommend postponing your planned visit. These are my citizens, Henri. I should hear their concerns." Devaux's polite smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, Mr. President. However, our intelligence suggests possible foreign agitation. The French counter-terrorism unit is prepared to investigate foreign agitators." The phrase was a convenient cloak for dissent. It smothered complaints about polluted rivers, about water cut-offs and exploitative mining deals, about us, communities living beside wealth they never saw. "One more thing," Devaux said, lowering his voice. "Our monitoring systems flagged increased diplomatic activity between Burkina Faso and Mali. Nothing concrete yet, but considering President Traoré's recent nationalization efforts, we advise vigilance." Ibrahim Traoré, just the name unsettled Nyambe's Western handlers. The young president of Burkina Faso had expelled foreign troops, seized back national resources, and built alliances across the continent. He was dangerous because he was independent. "Keep me informed," Nyambe said neutrally. That night, alone in his quarters, Nyambe poured himself a scotch, an aged single malt once favored by the British colonial governors. The irony didn't escape him. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Mr. President, a diplomatic representative from Burkina Faso requests a confidential audience tomorrow. This matter concerns our nation's sovereignty. For security reasons, the request is being delivered outside official channels." Nyambe stared at the screen. Contact with Traoré's government triggered automatic scrutiny. Meetings were discouraged. Official cooperation minimal. Burkina Faso represented a threat, not to Zambesi but to the system that kept men like Nyambe in power. The phone buzzed again. "The representative will arrive at your residence at 0900, disguised as maintenance. Personnel. Staff have been briefed on scheduled repairs. Reply, accept or reject." His finger hovered over the keyboard. Every survival instinct screamed reject. Report it to Devaux. Stay safe. And yet, somewhere inside him, a voice lingered. The voice of the man he once hoped to be. He typed one word. Accept. Sleep never came. Nyambe lay awake, thinking of the twin paths taken by Zambesi and Burkina Faso. Both resource-rich, both once colonies, both born into independence at the same moment in history. But where Zambesi remained shackled to foreign control, Burkina Faso had dared to imagine freedom and had begun to fight for it. At exactly 09 Urquhart the next morning, a man in a utility uniform was escorted into the residence. Once the door closed, he removed his cap. "Thank you for receiving me, President Nyambe," he said. "I am Ousmane Sankara, Deputy Foreign Minister of Burkina Faso. President Traoré sends his highest regards." "This meeting is irregular, Minister Sankara," Nyambe replied. "Our nations maintain diplomatic channels." "Channels monitored by your French advisors," Sankara said evenly. "President Traoré believes this proposal requires absolute discretion. And what is the proposal?" "A private meeting. Just the two presidents. No aides, no security, no entourages. At the hunting lodge on our shared border. 3 days from now." Nyambe's surprise must have shown. "We understand this is unconventional," Sankara said. "But President Traoré believes the future of African sovereignty depends on leaders speaking freely, without Western supervision." "And what would be the agenda?" "That is for the two presidents to determine. But I am authorized to tell you this. President Traoré has information critical to Zambesi's security and to your personal position." Before Nyambe could reply, his secure phone rang. Only his senior staff had that number. "Excuse me," he said, answering. "Yes?" "Mr. President," came his secretary's urgent voice. "Mr. Davao is en route to your residence. He says it's a matter of national security." Sankara had already heard. He replaced his cap. "I'll leave through the garden. President Traoré will be at the lodge at noon, 3 days from now. Your presence would be an honor. But he understands, if circumstances prevent it." Sankara slipped away just as Davao arrived, flanked by 2 French intelligence officers. "Mr. President," Davao said briskly, "we've detected irregular communications from the Burkina Faso embassy. Our analysts believe they're attempting unauthorized contact with your government." There was no pretense now. The surveillance was open. "Have they breached diplomatic protocol?" Nyambe asked calmly. "Not technically, but given Traoré's destabilizing actions, we believe any contact must be monitored." Davao studied his face. "Has anyone from their embassy reached out to you directly?" "No," Nyambe lied, astonished at how effortlessly the word came. "But I would expect to be informed of diplomatic contacts without French intelligence vetting them first," he added. "This is still an independent nation, Henri." Something flickered in Davao's eyes. Surprise, a trace of wariness. "Of course, Mr. President. Our presence is merely supportive, as defined by our bilateral agreement." When Davao left, Nyambe sank into his chair. The decision lay before him, stark and immense. To meet with Traoré would be to defy the very system that had made him president. But to decline might mean the end of Zambesi's last, fragile chance at true sovereignty. Western powers had propped up his government for years. Skipping the meeting might mean missing critical intelligence, perhaps even a threat to his power. Nyambe's thoughts were interrupted by another message from the unknown number. "The West's most reliable African leader just met with Ibrahim Traoré. After the meeting, the world shifted forever." A link followed, encrypted. Nyambe stared at it, puzzled. The message described a meeting that, to his knowledge, hadn't happened, one he hadn't even agreed to attend. That evening, in the privacy of his bathroom, with the shower running to muffle any sound, he opened the file on his personal tablet. 3 items: an audio recording, a document, and a video. He started with the audio, a conversation. One voice was unmistakably Devao's, his French advisor. The other, Parisian-accented. "Nyambe's been our most reliable asset in the region," said the Frenchman. "Mining concessions alone have saved our company's billions." "He's becoming restless," Devao replied, "asking questions about mining revenue, the new base expansions." "Then it may be time to consider alternatives. General Moena has always been ambitious." "We need the new diamond concessions secured first." "Can you maintain control until then?" "Of course. Nyambe trusts me completely. He doesn't make a move without our guidance." Nyambe's hands trembled as he opened the second file. A confidential agreement between the French government and several multinational corporations. His name appeared again and again. "Our man in Mobutu. A reliable facilitator. Most." Damning was a section labeled Contingency Planning, outlining steps to remove him if he became difficult. The final file was a video, grainy footage from a meeting he had never been told about. Western diplomats, corporate execs. A French official's voice echoed in the room. "He's useful for now, but if he turns nationalist, like Traoré, we'll need continuity. General Moena understands our interests." General Moena, his own defense minister, hand-picked years ago, on French recommendation. For hours, Nyambe sat frozen. He had always known his power was backed by Western support. He had convinced himself it was a partnership, pragmatic, mutually beneficial. But the truth was now undeniable. He was not a leader, but a placeholder, a manager of extraction, expendable the moment he questioned the script. By dawn, he had made his decision. The Burkina Faso Zambesi border was a dry stretch of wilderness. Near it stood a colonial-era hunting lodge, the only structure for miles. Reaching it without alerting his security team required careful deception. He declared a personal retreat to his country estate. A familiar move. Time away to reflect. His guards remained outside the grounds, unaware as he slipped through, a service entrance to meet a trusted childhood friend, waiting with a nondescript vehicle. 3 hours of driving. Remote villages gave way to open plains. In the silence, Nyambe reflected. 6 years of presidency. 6 years of compromise. He had read speeches written by others, signed deals that enriched foreign companies while Zambesi's people lived in poverty. Had it always been this way? Or had it happened slowly? The comfort of power, the fear of ending up like those African leaders who resisted and paid with exile, coups, or death. At the lodge, another car was already parked. Simple, unmarked, no insignias. Ibrahim Traoré stepped out. Younger than Nyambe expected. No red beret, no medals, just plain fatigues and the calm of a man who had already survived the worst. "President Nyambe," Traoré said, extending his hand. "President Traoré." Nyambe replied, "I believe you have some explaining to do. The message, the files." Traoré's expression didn't shift. "Let's speak inside." The lodge was barren. No electronics, no surveillance. Just 2 men, equals in title, opposites in conviction. "I didn't send you anything," Traoré said once seated. "But I'm curious. What did they contain?" Nyambe studied him. No flicker of deceit. Then who did? "I have ideas," Traoré said. "But tell me, why did you come? You could have ignored my invitation. Your Western friends certainly hoped you would." Nyambe paused, then answered truthfully. The files confirmed what I already suspected. I'm not in control of my country. Paris and Washington are. Traoré nodded. And how does that make you feel, President Nyambe? The question, so simple, stunned him. No one had asked about his feelings in years. His Western advisors never did. It makes me feel... He struggled, then found the word. Hollow, like I'm acting in someone else's play. I know that feeling. Traoré said softly. Before I took power, I watched leaders before me follow the script. Open the mines, invite the bases, borrow the loans. And our people stayed, poor. But you changed the script. Yes, and they tried to kill me for it. 3 assassination attempts, 2 coup plots, sanctions, frozen accounts. He leaned forward. Yet here we are, 1 year later. Our gold is ours. Our economy is growing. Our dignity is intact. Nyambe was both impressed and uncertain. Burkina Faso and Zambesi are different, he said. What worked for you might destroy us. Maybe, Traoré allowed. But some things are universal. Dignity, sovereignty. Your country has the largest diamond reserves in Africa, and some of the poorest citizens. Does that equation make sense to you? Before Nyambe could answer, Traoré placed a small device on the table. This is why I invited you. The device lit up, projecting intercepted messages. General Moena communicating with French officers. Bank transfers, coup plans, operational timelines. The operation was scheduled for next week. They're replacing you, Traoré said. You're asking too many questions. Nyambe was stunned. Why share this with me? We're not allies. Because Africa doesn't need another Western-backed coup. Because despite our differences, you and I are both Africans. And we are both haunted by a colonialism that never truly ended, just changed form. He paused. The West keeps control by keeping us divided, competing for their loans, their weapons, their praise. But when African nations stand together, the control begins to crumble. Nyambe finished quietly. If I move against Moena, he said aloud, I'll face everything they've used before. Sanctions, frozen accounts, opposition uprisings. Maybe worse. They'll try, Traoré said. But remember, their power depends on our division. I survived because I refused to be alone. Nyambe looked at him. So this meeting, it wasn't about the files. It was about an alliance. Traoré smiled faintly. No, it was about recognition. I saw something in you. The same doubt I felt before I acted. The same question you've been asking yourself every night. He held Nyambe's gaze. Am I serving my people or those who exploit them? What exactly are you proposing? Nyambe asked, his voice low but steady. A new economic alliance, Traoré replied without hesitation. Burkina Faso, Zambesi, and any African nation willing to prioritize sovereignty over foreign approval. Joint resource development, shared technical expertise, mutual defense. Nyambe frowned. The West would never allow it. Allow? Traoré echoed, raising an eyebrow. That word is the problem. Why should sovereign nations need permission? To cooperate? The question settled between them like a stone in water. Nyambe had no answer. I'm not asking for a decision today, Traoré continued. Deal with the coup first. But know this, when you choose to stand up, you will not stand alone. As they prepared to leave the secluded lodge, Nyambe turned back, troubled. If you didn't send me those files. Who did? Traoré offered a faint, cryptic smile. There are patriots everywhere, even inside the very institutions most loyal to foreign interests. The return journey gave Nyambe time to think, to plan. By the time he reached the presidential palace, he had the outlines of a strategy. Over the next 3 days, he moved with deliberate care. He contacted trusted military officers, men with no known ties to Paris or Washington, and shared selectively redacted evidence of the plot. He approached the head of the National Police, a career professional known for his integrity, and most important of all, he spoke to Amara. She had once been his sharpest political advisor, until Western consultants edged her out. "You knew, didn't you?" he asked quietly. "How I was being used." Amara met his eyes. "I've watched you disappear, Gabriel. The man I married, the one who dreamed of a Zambesi that served its people, faded year by year. Why didn't you say anything?" I did," she said gently. "For years. But you stopped listening." She took his hand. What changed? He told her everything. The meeting with Traoré, the evidence of betrayal, the years of foreign manipulation. "So," she asked when he finished, "what will you do now?" Nyambe's voice was clear. "What I should have done years ago. Lead." On the 4th day, he acted. In a swift surgical operation, loyal units arrested General Moena and 6 co-conspirators. Within hours, Nyambe's government released undeniable evidence, audio files, wire transfers, intercepted communications. A foreign-backed coup attempt laid bare. International backlash was immediate. The French government issued statements about due process. The IMF announced a review of Zambesi's loan agreements. Western media questioned Nyambe's stability. But inside Zambesi, something shifted. For the first time in his presidency, the people rallied to him, not out of fear or formality, but genuine belief. The proof of foreign interference struck a deep, familiar nerve in a nation long used to watching its wealth leave in foreign hands. 1 week later, Nyambe addressed the nation in a live broadcast. This time, the words were his own. "Citizens of Zambesi, for too long, I have led this nation according to others' expectations instead of our needs. I have signed agreements that enriched foreign corporations while our people remained poor. I allowed our sovereignty to be compromised in the name of diplomacy and development. That ends today. We are launching a full review of all mining contracts, military agreements, and foreign loans. Any arrangement that does not serve the interests of the Zambesi people will be renegotiated or terminated." He outlined clear reforms. Mandatory 51% national stake in all mining operations, revenue redirection to education and healthcare, strict limits on foreign military bases. As he spoke, his phone buzzed again and again. Messages from Washington, Paris, Brussels, demands for clarification, warnings, threats. He ignored them all. Instead, he typed a simple reply to the anonymous number that had sent the original files. "Thank you." The response came instantly. "Africa united cannot be defeated." That evening, Nyambe and Amara sat on the palace balcony as the sun sank over Mabu. He turned to her. "Was it you?" he asked. "The files, the message." Amara smiled, enigmatic. A president's wife hears things, sees things. People talk freely around me, assuming I'm just decoration. "Why not tell me directly?" "Would you have listened?" she asked softly. "Or dismissed it as my usual criticism?" She squeezed his hand. "You needed to see it yourself, with your own eyes." The months that followed were turbulent. Western governments retaliated. Loans were suspended. Banking channels were restricted. Media outlets painted Nyambe as erratic, dangerous. But 2 forces kept him steady. First, the people. Their support deepened. He was no longer a figurehead. He was theirs. Second, the alliance. What began with Traoré and Burkina Faso quickly expanded to include Mali, Niger, and Guinea. Each nation brought something to the table: diamonds, gold, uranium, agriculture, and together they gained leverage none had alone. 6 months after the Lodge meeting, Nyambe and Traoré stood side by side as the West African Resource Alliance was signed, a formal economic and security pact. Historians would later mark it as the start of a new African era. As cameras flashed and ministers applauded, Traoré leaned over and whispered, "The West once called you their most reliable African leader. What do you think they call you now?" Nyambe smiled. "I don't care what they call me. For the first time, I'm answering to my people, not to foreign powers." Traoré grinned. "And how does that feel?" Nyambe looked out over the crowd, over his country. "No longer hollow," he said. "Whole," in capitals across the West. Analysts and ministers huddled in emergency meetings. They reviewed intelligence. They ran simulations. The conclusions were dire. Resource nationalism was spreading. Influence was collapsing. The old methods were failing. "How did we lose Nyambe?" demanded a French minister behind closed doors. "He was reliable for years." The intelligence chief had no answer. Something changed in him. Traoré, maybe, or his wife, we don't know. But none of them, not one, grasped the real answer. Gabriel Nyambe had awakened, to his dignity, to his duty, to his people. The puppet had found his voice, and all across Africa, other leaders were starting to listen.